We are not alone. You are watching Contact TV with your hosts, Leslie Mitchell-Clark
and Wes Roberts,
exploring ufology, metaphysics, and beyond with the world's foremost experts. And a very good morning, afternoon, evening to you folks out there in the interweb, and welcome to another edition of Contact TV. In fact, I think we are kicking off, Wes Roberts and I are kicking off our 13th season right now. And what a wonderful way to kick off a new season of Contact TV. We are welcoming back one of our very favored guests, and certainly Michael Cremo is known internationally as not only a renegade archaeologist, but he's also a American freelance researcher and a Vedic creationist who also uses the devotional name Drut Karma Das. And one of Michael Cremo's most interesting premises, or premi, is that he has discovered research that is compelling and I believe completely establishes that human beings or hominids have lived on the earth for millions of years and not this shortened archaeological timeline that mainstream science would have us believe. So without further ado, I would love to welcome to the program Michael Cremo. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be back with you, Leslie, and Wes also.
Wonderful. I had a chance to look over Forbidden Archaeology, which, of course, I've read. And one thing that stands out to me, among many things, is that when we're talking about Darwinism and, of course, natural selection, which you do go into in great detail, certainly Darwin proved that through natural selection, a species could improve itself or adapt, but one species does not evolve into another species. And so within your work, can you tell me a little bit about what you believe occurred between the periods of, shall we say, Miocene apes or proto-humans to when, Homo sapien finally emerges? What do you believe that there was intervention, genetic intervention?
Well, I think there was an intervention, but I think the important thing to understand is what is a human being? Before we ask when and where human beings appeared, let's first establish what a human being is. Now, many scientists today are going to say, we're machines made of molecules, and that's all there is to it. As far as consciousness is concerned, well, they say that's just the interaction of chemicals in the brain. Mm-hmm. But I don't accept that. I believe that consciousness has an independent existence, separate from matter, separate from the brain, separate from the body. And it's something that is eternal. It has no beginning, no end. So all of us, in that sense, are extraterrestrial beings because we're not from this world of matter originally. Mm-hmm. And I would say that the universe actually has a purpose, and it's to allow conscious selves to understand. It's like an education school, an education institution, like a school for learning who we really are, where we should be. And to me, that suggests humans have always been around, because in the human bodily vehicle that we can inquire and understand about these things. So I think as long as the universe has been here as an educational institution for conscious selves who, for one reason or another, aren't fit to, at the present moment, to be existing on what I call the level of pure consciousness, where the ruling principle is harmonious, loving cooperation among all conscious beings and the source of all conscious beings, all harmonious, loving. We're in a place now that is kind of like an alternative reality for living entities who want to dominate, control, exploit others to some extent or another. So we have an opportunity for two choices here. Get more and more deeply involved in controlling, exploiting, dominating, in competition with others who are trying to do the same thing, or to be on what I would call the side of light, trying to understand I'm a being of pure consciousness, you're a being of pure consciousness. So I think that opportunity has always been there. The human vehicle has always been there for conscious entities in this world. It's like when scientists make a space station, I think China is making one now. They're putting together a space station. But they're not thinking that, well, maybe somehow or other the chemicals in the space station will combine and form some first simple living thing that will gradually evolve and become astronauts. No, they build the space station for the astronauts. As soon as the station's ready, they're in it. So I think our universe is something like that, a big space station, and it's there for conscious selves and the human bodily vehicle to give them a chance to understand who they really are and where they really should be.
I see. So we really are spirits in the material world, in a sense. And
That song from the Police.
yes.
We are spirits in the material world.
That's it.
That's it.
I love it.
It's a great tune.
From the 80s, so many people won't be familiar. I like it.
Yeah, great tune. Well, this is kind of the cruel school in a sense, because as you say, but it is a way to learn and perfect ourselves. Now, do you also think, Michael, that even though this is the third density and we have people with different agendas, beings with different agendas, do you think that enlightened beings also choose consciously to walk among us to hopefully upgrade the general awareness or consciousness?
Absolutely. Yeah, they're I mean, I'm very much influenced by Indian systems of spiritual thought. There's the concept of avatars, and there are all kinds of avatars. Avatar means one who descends willingly from a higher level to a lower energy level in order to help guide those conscious selves who are trying to raise their energy levels and come to a proper understanding of themselves and others as well. So there are different grades of different levels of avatars that may come. Some may be avatars of higher beings of a god or demigod level. Some may be teachers of different fields of yoga and meditation and thought. And so yes, I believe there have been thousands, millions of avatars. Of course, the Buddhists have a system of repeated appearances of Buddhas over the course of vast cycles of time lasting billions and trillions of years. So I think it's a common feature of many wisdom traditions that yes, there are those beings who consciously come to this world, this alternative reality, we might call it, and try to wake us up.
Excellent. Michael, could you tell us a little bit about how you feel contemporary Homo sapiens came to be in the sense of our meat suits, our physicality, and how that would differentiate from, say, a being like, Lucy, found in the Ogilvy Gorge?
Well, ultimately, there's not such a big difference in this sense that we are all eternal, conscious selves, individual, personal, conscious, eternal. That's all of us, every living thing, whether it's a human bodily vehicle or an Australopithecine bodily vehicle or a plant vehicle or an insect vehicle. The conscious self is the same in each of them. Just like as a person, to get around, I may drive in a car, I may ride a bicycle, I may fly in the sky in an airplane, I may go under the water in a submarine, I may go into outer space in a space capsule. I'm the same person, but according to the vehicle that I'm riding in, I can do different things. In a fast sports car, I can go faster than I can on a bicycle or a skateboard. If I'm in an airplane, I can fly. So it just depends upon the vehicle that one is in. But the conscious self remains the same, whatever it is. So I think what really has happened is that whoever has arranged this reality that we're in now understood that conscious selves can have different levels of desires, different kinds of desires. So there's a whole range of bodily vehicles that each conscious self chooses, in the sense that it's focusing on certain types of desires, and certain types of desires are fulfilled in one vehicle more so than in another. So if you want to fly, well, you have to have a vehicle that flies. If you want to swim under the water, you got to have a vehicle like a submarine or something that'll let you do that. So I would say there's an arrangement for conscious selves to occupy different kinds of bodies. Then how you use the vehicle determines what your next one will be, because all of these, as you call them, meat suits, are temporary. They come into being at a certain point in time, and then they disintegrate, and the conscious self moves on to another vehicle. And that's determined by the state of one's, we could call it, mental body. There's a gross physical body, then there's a mental body, then I would say there's a conscious self. And I would say Darwin had a correct insight. He just didn't know what is actually transforming or evolving.
True enough.
It's the subtle mental body that always stays with us lifetime after lifetime. And as that subtle mental body evolves, it is provided with different kinds of gross physical bodies. So it's the mental body that is changing, continuously evolving, you might say.
So in your I don't you want to use the term belief system, it sounds too religious, but in your research and understanding of how this works, do you so you accept or the idea that we have also, as intelligent celled beings, we have gone into the animal forms as well.
Well, every conscious self has its own path.
Mhm.
It might be possible for a conscious self to come into this alternative reality, which is, according to the Vedic cosmology, one of millions and millions of universes that coexist.
Mm.
There's interesting accounts in the Puranas of how all the universes emanate from an expansion of Krishna called Mahavishnu,
Mhm.
who is lying on what's called the causal ocean,
Mm.
dreaming. And as he breathes out, universes come out of his body, conscious selves are placed in them. And then when he breathes in, the universes contract back into his body. So you could say what we're experiencing now is a dream, the dream of Mahavishnu.
Mm.
And we're in that, what was that radio show called? Dreamland?
Mhm.
Art Bell show a long time.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We're in dreamland.
We're in
Yep.
Dreamland. So
I agree. Yeah, I do. I sometimes think that that we're living many kinds of experiences all at once. That in our so-called sleep life, we're traveling astrally or etherically or psychophysically, and experiencing. So it's not just this. I don't think it's a linear universe. It's not just the linear experience. It's more. It's multidimensional, and a lot of things are happening at the same time, I believe.
but to get back to your specific
Yes.
question
Mhm.
about whether we have existed as animals in animal vehicles, that possibility is there. It's
Mhm.
not necessary, but it could happen, and it probably does happen quite a bit. I would say it's possible for a conscious self to be just one lifetime in this material universe that we find ourselves in now.
Mhm.
Be here for one lifetime in a human form of life and just get it right away and, evolve to that higher level of pure consciousness beyond birth and death,
Mhm.
and just be in that state just after a very short experience.
Mm.
For most of us, probably it takes a little bit longer than one lifetime. As for our human vehicle, generally when you have a vehicle, like if you to drive a car, you've got to have a license, a driver's license. To fly a plane, you got to have a pilot's license. To be the captain of a ship, you have to have ship captain's license. You have to have a license to operate the vehicle. If you operate the vehicle in such a way that you cause harm to yourself or to others, in other words, if you misuse the vehicle, you operate it in a harmful, destructive way, either destructive to yourself or destructive to others, then you may find you lose your license for that vehicle, and you have to get around in another way.
Mhm.
You have to walk or ride a bus or catch Ubers or taxis. You have to get around some other way. So if we misuse the human form of life, if we misuse our human bodily vehicle to cause harm to ourselves or harm to others, in other words, if we're DUI, then, well, we might get a different type of body, and it may not be a human body. And sometimes this comes out, most people don't really remember past lives as animals. Some do,
Mhm.
but many don't. But sometimes I think it comes out in dreams,
Mhm.
things like that, when we experience perhaps again, the kinds of emotions that some kind of animals experience, like great sudden fear, that one is going to be attacked in a way that's very harmful, or so it may come out in dreams sometimes, or in very intense experiences that we might be undergoing, where we feel that fight or flight instinct, or something along those lines.
I see. And well, I don't know if you remember, Michael, but I am a master hypnotherapist, and I do a lot of work in past life regression. And you're absolutely right. It is so rare for someone to recall a animal existence, but it does happen every once in a while, and it always sort of surrounds, as you say, a heavy-duty emotion of some sort in that way. But I have regressed people before who have had very interesting machines, bodies, as you say, that are aquatic, maybe, humanoid but aquatic. So in other words, without even realizing it, people will sometimes bring forth a lifetime. I don't know if it's this planet or another planet, but some type of symbiosis between what we think is a bipedal humanoid and some other type of characteristics, like an aquatic life.
Michael, one of the things that I've been interested in my whole life, and still am, is what we call ESP, or the psi factor. And although you didn't mention this specifically, I subscribe to the belief that we have non-local consciousness. And I'm wondering if that's something we've always had. Did we bring that into the world? You know, when the hairs stand up in the back of your neck, or your sister's going to phone you, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. I think Rupert Sheldrake has done some very interesting experiences along those lines. Interestingly enough, Rupert and myself were speaking a few years ago at the same conference. It was being held in Montreal, Canada. And we introduced ourselves to each other, and I went to his workshop on such things. And one of the examples that he gave, it's a very common experience that people have. You'll be sitting somewhere and you have the very, very strong feeling somebody is staring at the back of my head.
Right.
Around somebody's just gazing at you. I mean, he said sometimes it happens more commonly with women than with men, but that's what he said. But in any case, he said this is something that can be tested. So there were about 100 of us there, and he divided us up into 50 pairs. And one person in the pair would sit on a chair, and then immediately behind that person, the second person would be sitting in a chair. And he'd have a list of instructions, say 20 instructions. Stare at the person's head. Don't stare, 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 kind of random. And the person in front at each interval would have to say, is the person staring at the back of my head or not? And if it's just chance, it should be 50-50, that they would get it correct. But, in the experiment, I mean, I did it, I participated in it. People were getting 60, 70, 80% correct.
That's
He said, this is a very simple experiment. It can be done under more controlled conditions where you completely soundproof everything. And, the two people who are being tested would, you could rule out all kinds of signaling or whatever. So it is fascinating. I think a lot of our modern technology, I think these are abilities that conscious selves actually have and had used more than they do now.
Mhm.
I think a lot of our technology today is our attempt to duplicate
Mhm.
abilities that the human conscious beings had uh, in previous ages.
Wes and I often talk about technology today as training wheels, with my hope being that the training wheels are, the technology is maybe a phase that other societies have been through in previous times before we believe in ourselves again and began using our pineal gland and our natural abilities to accomplish things at the speed of thought. So I'm hoping that we can get to that point in evolution. Speaking of which, let's talk for a minute about what I call global amnesia, about how we have very little awareness of previous mega civilizations, even though the evidence is just coming out of the woodwork like crazy. I mean, we have, I think now, and you'll have to correct me, Michael, if this isn't true, but I believe now that Göbekli Tepe is the eldest structure that that we're talking about now that has been discovered that we really can't understand, and how old is this mysterious place in southern Turkey? And is it Atlantean? Was it Lemurian? Was it another culture? Was it just us?
Well, as far as you could say the bare factual evidence is concerned, Göbekli Tepe appears to be a place where megalithic structures were erected. Stonehenge, which many people are familiar with, is a megalithic structure. In other words, large pieces of stone were moved and manipulated. So you have similar features discovered at this place in Turkey, Göbekli Tepe. And you have large megalithic pieces of stone with the additional feature of carving animals of different kinds. And the site is judged to be about 13,000 years old. Now, according to the standard picture of history, at that time, people should not have been doing that sort of thing. They were simply hunters and gatherers. There was no settled village life. So that settled village life with agriculture and things like that started about 10,000 years ago in what's called the Neolithic revolution by archaeologists and other historians. So, and according to that picture, civilization, like the Egyptian civilization or Chinese civilization or any of the other early civilizations, they came about between 6,000 and 7,000 years ago. So to have this kind of monumental megalithic work done by whoever was there at the time sort of pushes the origin of civilization back to 13,000 years. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, alternative history and alternative archaeology is a big field. Some people, some researchers are more focused on the recent end of the spectrum, gradually pushing back the time of civilization a few thousand years, maybe up to 25,000 years or 50 years, as some are doing. And others, like myself, are dealing with what we might call deep time. And there, we find some interesting hints that civilization may be far older than Göbekli Tepe which is 13,000 years, or even the 20,000 years or 40,000 years that researchers like Graham Hancock speak about. So, for example, I mean, in the 19th century, in the United States, in Illinois, at a place called, trying to remember the name of the place, but researchers from the Smithsonian Institution were drilling, and they were witnessing some drilling that was being done by people who were making an artesian well. I think Lawn Springs, Illinois, that's the name of the place. At Lawn Springs, Illinois, somebody was drilling an artesian well. And as you drill down, material gets sucked up through the pipes that are being hammered into the ground. And different objects were coming up, pieces of stone and sand and clay. And a coin-like object came up made of copper. And it had on its two faces human figures and some script in an unknown language. So it came from 114 feet deep. And, we asked, my co-author, Richard Thompson, and I, we inquired from the Illinois Department of Geology, State Department of Geology, how old is the layers of sediment at that level, at that place. We didn't mention the coin-like object that had been found there, because if you do that, then they don't answer your letter. And we just made an inquiry. How old is the layer at 114 feet? Said, that's about 200,000 years old. It's this formation or that formation. I can't remember exactly what they called it, but they said 200,000 years. So to have a coin like at 200,000 years, I mean, normally they say the first coins were made in a country called Lydia, which is in the area of what's now Turkey. That was the first recorded use of coins. So to have that at 200,000 years in North America is really amazing. Because if you think of coins, then that means there had to be some kind of government, there had to be some kind of economy where exchange of goods was going on. It really means something. And I think there could have been civilizations like that. When the Europeans first came to the Americas, there was a huge civilization in the Mississippi River Valley. The Native American peoples, they had huge cities that matched anything that was going on in Europe. They had huge cities at places like Cahokia site and in the Mississippi River Valley, all kinds of places. So, and their idea of their history is completely different than the history that modern archaeologists attribute to them. And they say, they came over from Siberia across a land bridge that existed maybe 15,000 years ago, maybe at most 20,000 years ago. But their picture of their history is a little different. They say, we've been here a long, long time. We're not newcomers here. And, that's a whole topic. That's
a big one. Well, they have.
Civilizations have come and gone many times, I believe.
I believe so too. And, in fact, in North America, there have been reputable examples of Ogham found, an extremely ancient, Celtic form of writing. They've found Phoenician script. They've even found hieroglyphs, Egyptian hieroglyphs, in as diverse places as the Grand Canyon. So, obviously, human beings who are curious. I mean, we have traveled and engaged in trade for millennia, and there have been catastrophes, probably some natural, maybe some not so natural. It's hard to know. But Michael, from a linguistic standpoint, now you are such a scholar of languages, and generally Sanskrit is considered ground zero for organized language that we know of. And how can you explain, or what is the theory behind Sanskrit being found in far-flung languages, in the Basque language, and among my own people, in the Irish languages? The Celtic languages are heavily infused with Sanskrit. How did this happen?
Well, there's a couple of things that could be said about that. I mean, from the standard point of linguists and anthropologists and historians, they would have one thing to say. If we look at things from the viewpoint of the Vedic worldview, you get another story, because languages are connected with people, and people live in particular places, and they also migrate and move. I mean, you were mentioning, just to get back to another point, you had mentioned how in North America you find evidence for the presence of Phoenician and old Celtic languages and inscriptions. There's also evidence in those places for some Vedic, some contacts from North America. We'll leave aside the Vedic point for right now, but just things that come from North America, like they found tobacco and cocaine.
And the mummies.
Stored, along with Egyptian mummies and Egyptian graves and things like that, showing that there was some trade going on. It wasn't just them coming to North America, it was North American people, native people, sending their stuff the other way.
Yep.
So trade is a two-way function. It doesn't go just one way. But to get back to the languages, there is evidence in Vedic texts, particularly the Puranas or the histories, that say that Vedic culture was once widely spread all over the world. And it happened in the context of people who knew the Sanskrit language, who were part of the Vedic culture, migrated outward from what's now the Indian subcontinent. And as they did that, they met other people and mixed with them. And, so it's not that you're going to get, 100% pure Sanskrit or Vedic teachings, but you'll get a mixture or a blend of influences rather than the pure original Sanskrit or Vedic teachings. So you do find that. You find in the Americas signs of contact with Vedic systems of thought. For example, in South America, you can find carvings, stone carvings made by the Incas and the Aztecs and other North American civilizations and people, like carvings of people in yoga postures, half lotus. Somebody showed me a picture of a carving, sculpture from India of someone in a half lotus posture. like sitting on a throne or a stool with one foot on the ground and then the other foot, the heel, placed on the thigh, and then having the hands arranged in a certain pattern or mudra. It was like the image of the carving from South America and the image of the carving from India were practically identical.
Wow.
Sometimes in the South American temple architecture, they have carvings of elephants and lotuses, which are prominent themes in Indian architecture. So you do find these elements. As far as the languages are concerned, as you mentioned, practically all the European languages, except very few of them, like spoken by the Basques and the Hungarians and Finnish people, they show a big connection with Sanskrit, like the Slavic languages as well, Russian, Czech, Polish. You can all see the influence there. And then the culture spread into Southeast Asia. Like you can today see ruins of Vedic temples, like at Angkor Wat in Cambodia. And they call that whole area, they used to call it anyways, Indochina.
Yes. Yeah, Indochina.
Indian and Chinese influence. And Buddhism, which has become prominent in China and Japan and throughout Asia, is originally from India. So, and then that there's evidence of the culture spreading throughout what's now Indonesia. There are remains of Vedic temples from Indonesia. So, yeah, it was a widespread culture. So its influence was felt all over the world, and that's reflected in the languages, architecture, and customs that show perhaps not pure Vedic culture or pure Sanskrit, but some modification of them.
Michael, I don't know if you prefer to talk about this, but I wanted to just vocalize my own astonishment at some of your critics. This evidence of absence of evidence thing. I really don't understand how otherwise intelligent people, researchers, maybe scientists, have chosen to pick on you. I know it's not a hard question. It's a bit of a soft question.
Yeah, well, not all of them do. I've kind of noticed that in the scientific community, it's not monolithic. There are, in terms of reactions to my work and that of others who are doing similar things, I think falls into three categories. You've got one group that I call the fundamentalist materialists. And they're committed to that particular view for reasons that I think are not strictly scientific. It's more perception and bias that they have. And their reaction to my work is extremely negative. They don't want to hear it. They don't want anyone else to hear it. They will try to cancel lectures. That is one group. It's a fairly substantial group. But there's another group who are committed to the current theories for more or less scientific reasons, which means they're willing to listen to alternatives and give them a respectful hearing. And it's scientists in that group who have invited me to speak at universities, accepted my proposals to present papers at mainstream conferences on archaeology and philosophy of science and things like that. And they're also a substantial group. that are at least willing to listen. And they've published reviews of my books that are not endorsing everything I say, but are saying, acknowledging there's some value to this. It's helpful for our understanding. And then there's a smaller group of scientists or graduate students who actually agree with me. Of course, they're small in number, but there are some of them. So, yeah, the kind of reaction that you're talking about, this highly negative, refusing to even listen, dismissive view, that is held by a substantial group of scientists. But there are others in that second group who appreciate there's not just one archaeology, a Western, objective, reductionistic, scientific archaeology that has the truth about the past that everybody should recognize because we are the experts. There's another group, which I call the archaeologies group, which they appreciate that their discipline was used during colonial times to suppress the worldviews of different people in different parts of the world, that they were happening to rule through their empires, the British Empire, the French Empire. Even America had the Philippines and Puerto Rico and a few other places. So they recognized that their discipline was used in such a way to justify that colonialism, the superiority of the Western and European peoples. And so they're open. They know there can be different perspectives. There can be a Native American Indian archaeology. There can be a Pacific Islander archaeology. There can be an Australian Aboriginal archaeology. There are archaeologies that can be informed by other worldviews that deal with different types of evidence than the stones and bones that they're used to working with. That there's an appreciation for what can be known about the past through traditional sources of wisdom. And that may involve shamanic experiences or things of that sort. So there is, I think, within archaeology, a group that may not be prepared to endorse everything I say, but they are willing, they can see how it fits within their discipline. But that other approach that you mentioned is also there, and I could give many examples of it.
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate getting to ask that question and your thorough answer. And I know, Leslie, we have maybe 10 minutes left, so maybe another question and then ask Michael what's coming up.
Wonderful. I just thought we might touch on for a moment. I know in Forbidden Archaeology, you did spend quite a bit of time speaking about the wild men of different locations, Bigfoot, Yeti. Tell me about these beings, Michael. Are they interdimensional? Why have they been on Earth since really the dawn of time? Do they have sophisticated social groupings, or are they all completely different? The Yeti, the Yowie, the Bigfoot.
Yeah, good question. The reason I introduced that topic into the book Forbidden Archaeology is because one of my main points was that if we look at all the archaeological evidence, we find that human beings like us, anatomically modern humans, have coexisted for millions of years on this planet with apes and monkeys and intermediate types of beings like the different kinds of ape men that scientists talk about: Homo erectus, the Neanderthals, Homo habilis, Australopithecus. And my point in bringing up the Sasquatch and Yeti and Almas and other types of ape man-like creatures is to say that, well, even today we're coexisting with apes and monkeys, and also these intermediate beings. Even some scientists have recognized that, like the British anthropologist Myra Shackley wrote a whole book about evidence for the existence of living ape men. So in general, that's why I brought up the topic, to say, just as today, there's evidence suggesting that human beings are coexisting on this planet with apes and monkeys, yes, and also intermediate beings that appear to be halfway between apes and monkeys and human beings. So it's true today. It was also true in the past. Now, you mentioned something about being interdimensional. That takes you into a different kind of realm than what I've been talking about on this topic over the past minute or two. But the Sanskrit writings of India, the Puranas, have accounts of beings with ape-like bodies but human-like intelligence, wearing clothing, and having social groupings that include hierarchies like king and subject, and that use a simple culture, technology. It's simple technology, using simple weapons for whatever conflicts they engage in. But they have a technology, but it's simple level of culture. But the one thing they also had that is not mentioned in Western scientific accounts of Australopithecus and Homo erectus is they had mystic powers. They could fly without any vehicle. In other words, they could transfer themselves, some of them, from place to place. So, and some of them became quite famous, like Hanuman. In India is worshipped even today in many temples. So I think that is something that is reported by many Bigfoot researchers, that and it may be one reason why these things are very hard to catch. Or observe, is that they have these abilities to appear and disappear at will, to have extrasensory perception, remote viewing capabilities that let them see who's coming and when, and that they can remove themselves from a situation by use of their mystic powers. So that takes it to another whole level.
Indeed, it does, and that opinion is certainly borne out by the Aboriginal peoples of North America and Australia and elsewhere. The indigenous peoples, venerate is too strong a word, but I know that they live cooperatively. A woman of the Lakota people once told me that they just considered them special humans, and they had a symbiotic relationship and would leave gifts. The Lakota people would leave big salmon on one side of the river, and these beings made interesting little sculptures and art pieces out of reeds and things, and they would leave them for their Native American neighbors. So I think when they feel safe, they are probably able to materialize and do. But I completely agree. I think that they are. I think that they they have these special abilities, and thank goodness they're as elusive as they are, or all those armed Americans would be out there, ready to shoot them or whatever.
So we should ask Michael about his upcoming appearances.
Yes.
Or how to find.
Yes, Michael. What is what's coming up for you? Are you appearing somewhere? And if someone wanted to reach out to you, what would be the best way to do that?
Well, one thing that's coming up that I'm very excited about is the opportunity to be a speaker at the Earth Origins event that's going to be held in Sedona, Arizona, which is really a magical place.
Oh, man. Yeah.
It's going to be held the weekend of October 15th through 17th, I believe. Let me look at my calendar.
Okay. Coming right up, 2 weeks or so.
15th through the 17th. So they can learn about that on my website, mcremo.com, by going to the schedule link, and they'll see it there. And I also have a page specifically dedicated to that upcoming event, the Earth Origins.
Wonderful.
Fourth conference in that series, the fourth Earth Origins Conference in Sedona, Arizona. And there's a page, mcremo.com/earthorigins.html. But it can also be reached, as I said, through my main website by going to the schedule link and then clicking on what's there. And the website is also a good place to connect with me. There's a mail drop there, and it comes to me. And I try to reply to as many as my correspondence as I can. May not be able to reply as soon or at as much length as I would like, but I do try to be responsive to those who contact me through that website.
Well, that's
Thank you.
wonderful,
Thank you.
Michael. Do you know if at the Earth Origins Conference, if some of it is going to be streamed? Will people be able to see it in that way? Or I guess we should just check it out at the website.
It's a hybrid event.
Okay,
Oh,
good.
Live and live stream.
Excellent.
We're in person.
Fantastic.
In Sedona.
Wonderful.
What an interview.
Looking forward to that. And I think I'm going to be speaking about a topic that I mentioned here, and that's the Native American people's time and archaeology. What their view of time is and what sort of evidence there might be that's supportive of that, consistent with that.
Fantastic.
Fascinating. Wow.
Well, Michael, we can't thank you enough for joining us again. And we won't let so many years go by next time, I promise. And thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing. It is mind-opening. I ask everyone just to open their minds and see how things feel to you. That's all we can do, and that's what we're doing. Thank you, Michael. We'll see you again real soon, I'm sure, and have a fantastic time at the convention. We'll be promoting it on the show. And remember what we always say, we are not alone. Thank you, Michael. Take care now.
Thank you for all that you do.
Our pleasure.
It's a group effort.
It is truly. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Have a great afternoon.
Take care. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
We are not alone. You are watching Contact TV with your hosts, Leslie Mitchell-Clark
and Wes Roberts.
Exploring ufology, metaphysics, and beyond with the world's foremost experts.